So what do you expect to hear from Governor Corbett on Tuesday in his budget address as it pertains to pension reform? Is it going to be similar to what we had heard last year in that plan, or do you really expect a significantly different proposal or approach to tackling this problem?
Well, what I'd love to hear is for him to adopt my 3 buckets proposal, but I'm not expecting that. We're not there yet. I do expect that he will say that it's critical that we get some budgetary relief through pension reform. He may put a number out there as a challenge to us to work from now until June to come up with a compromise plan that generates, let's say, $150, $200 million in savings in the next budget, just for the general fund, plus the school district.
Yeah, that's a number I've heard. Yeah.
I don't think it will give a whole lot of specifics on what that plan will be, although I think there's a lot of discussion about a different a type of hybrid plan, not the type that I'm proposing in a cash balance plan, but a plan that has an element of defined contribution and an element of defined benefit. So the defined benefit's sort of the safety net so that everybody gets a certain base pension, and those who put more money in because they earn more would get a defined contribution bump on top of that the employer would contribute to. I'm going to be looking to see, whether that kind of new plan design actually saves money compared to the current system, and whether it's a fair retirement benefit for all of our state workers and school district workers. I think there will be a proposal to tighten the collars on those employer contributions. Last year the proposal was, instead of allowing that contribution to go up by 4.5% per year, it would be 2.25%, half of that. I expect that we'll probably hear more of that, about the same amount, maybe 2 to 3% maximum increase, and that is at least a gesture to the school districts that we're going to reduce the amount that you have to pay in this year.
Is that reasonable?
I mean, it's more of the same. Anytime you tighten the collars, anytime you give short-term relief, there's less money going into the fund, and that's
maybe more long-term problems too.
Well, certainly. I mean, if you're putting less money in this year than you should, it's going to increase your unfunded liability, and it's going to just push that increased employer contribution down the road to a later date.
Unless you're getting 10 or 11% as opposed to 7.5% rate of return each year, which is maybe unlikely. I mean, I know they've seen pretty good returns recently, but it's not. You need that every year for a long period of time.
Right. I've heard. I don't know if this is exactly correct, but I've heard that those funds would have to generate at least 20% annual return for the next 20 years, each of the next 20 years, to grow our way out of this. So I don't think that's going to happen. Now, we have an assumed rate of return of 7.5% in those funds. That's what all the actuarial reports are based on. Whether we get that every year, we certainly don't get it every year, but one bit of assurance is that over the past 30 years, the actual rate of return has been over 8%. So, past history is not a predictor of future performance, but a 7.5% or 7% assumed rate of return is not unreasonable, but I think a 20% return for the next 20 years is pie in the sky, and that's not going to happen.
Okay. What happens if we stay on, on the current track? Everybody floats a number of proposals. There really isn't enough consensus. That time in the year just isn't good. Everybody wants to focus on the budget as a whole. We stay on this track. What does that mean? What does that do for the state's bond rating? What does that do for an ability to borrow or the rate at which you can borrow at some point down the road for maybe a bigger project that you want to tackle? What does it do?
Well, the most recent bond ratings for the Commonwealth were downgraded by all 3 of the rating agencies, and among other things, they did specifically mention the Commonwealth's failure to adequately deal with this unfunded liability problem with the pension. So if we don't do anything at all, I see a further downgrade in the bond ratings as something that's likely. But the real impact is going to be, well, there are those who say, let's just let Act 120 work. Now, I was one of the co-authors of Act 120, so I think it was a good piece of legislation, but we all knew
more.
that didn't solve the problem completely. That's what we could do at that time to stop the bleeding. I think, so letting Act 120 work, if we simply do nothing, then the school districts are going to have a doubling of their employer contribution over the next 4 years if we let Act 120 work. So I don't think that's something that's feasible.
It has a big, short term, long term. It has all of that has a significant impact on business and on the local economy. I mean,
Sure.
Continuing to see big increases like that, and maybe.
Well, the housing market.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a school district and the property tax is going up that much every year just to pay pension obligations, not even talking about Affordable Care Act obligations that are going to be on these school districts, yeah, it's going to have a chilling effect on economic growth, and it's going to have a real big impact on those people that have to pay the property tax increases. So, I think though that the worst thing we could do is simply address the short-term budget need and tighten the collars without doing anything else. Because if we do that, we're reducing the amount going into the fund, and we're getting no long-term reforms in exchange for it. That's what got us into this position in the first place. That was one of the major causes that we talked about earlier of how we got in this place, by underfunding the plan.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to happen, because I think there are a lot of us who will be screaming if that's all that is proposed. So I'm hoping that the administration and our friends in the unions and those unrepresented public employees will see this whole picture and work with school districts and come up with something that spreads the pain around a little bit, but really addresses the totality of the problem.
Yeah, the unions seem willing to work on the issue. They're just, even your proposal when you came out with it, they, said, it was definitely a good place to really get the conversation moving forward. It kind of, came to a halt there for a while because everybody focused on one piece or another piece. Your plan was a little more, obviously a lot more comprehensive than that, and we'll have to see what ultimately, the governor proposes on Tuesday. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about municipal pensions a little bit. I know it's a little, different animal.
Before you do that, let me just say, with respect to the unions, I've had a really good working relationship with the unions on this issue, but frankly and candidly, they've walked away from the table for the past couple months. And it's disappointing because without their engagement, we're not going to solve this problem. In fact, they said something nice a couple weeks ago that they like the direction and the approach I'm taking, and they're studying my plan. Well, candidly, they've been studying my plan for 6 months.
Okay.
So it's time for the final exam here.
Yeah.
Stop the studying. Tell me what you like, what you don't like about my plan, where it could be negotiated, where we could compromise it to get their buy-in. Because without that, it's going to be much more difficult.
Do you think we'll hear more about what they really support after Tuesday, when they also hear what the governor's kind of worked out in the 6 months since your plan came out? That maybe it gives them a little better understanding, and maybe we'll get a clearer picture from their end.
I'm optimistic that whatever the governor says in his budget address will at least advance the conversation. So, yes, I'm hopeful that will advance it.
Okay. On the municipal side, I know it's separate. We're focused a lot on the two state systems, but local governments also have a lot to deal with in terms of retirement. There are a few proposals on the table to address municipal pensions. Could you talk a little bit about how the two things may connect here in the coming months? Will the state plan, whatever may or may not happen, be duplicated at the local government level? Is that possible?
Well, I think one will lead to the other. There is a need to do something with municipal pensions. As you mentioned earlier, there's $7 or $8 or $9 billion worth of unfunded liability among municipal pension plans. But by and large, the municipal plans are in better shape than the two state systems.
Yeah.
So sequentially, I don't think the legislature can legitimately or will tell municipalities how to run their pension plans better until we figure out how to fix our two statewide plans. But I think one very easily could create a domino effect and give us sort of the momentum to, if we can do SERS and PSERS, then I think the momentum is there for us to do the municipal plans.
Yeah.
And there are two leading proposals out there, and they're not mutually exclusive. I have a proposal to take all of the municipal police pension plans. We have thousands of them, and well, actually we have 900 just in police plans. We have thousands of municipal plans.
Yeah.
We have over 900 municipal police pension plans. Roll them into one plan that's statewide, that would share or gain a lot of operating efficiencies by unifying them. Have a standardized benefit.
Mm-hmm.
You would take pension issues off of the collective bargaining table, which would be a benefit to the municipalities. You would give your police officers the ability to move more freely from one department to another because their pension would be portable.
Yeah.
So I think that is one approach that ought to be considered. And there's another approach that simply changes the benefit structure for municipal police, and that proposal includes municipal fire, paid fire people, to a cash balance plan similar to the cash balance plan I'm proposing for SERS and PSERS. Like I said, the two are not mutually exclusive, and I think that if we get through and do something on the state level, a natural secondary step would be to do the municipal. Although we have to make sure that if we're combining municipal pension plans, we're not having the strong plans bailing out the weak plans.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to sequence it so that in order for a municipality to come into the statewide plan, they would have to separately make arrangements to fully fund their plan.
Okay.
So they can hand off their obligations if they also hand off sufficient assets to pay those obligations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously the Pennsylvania Municipal League and the Coalition for Sustainable Communities, they've been working. I know they've been working on trying to get some of these issues addressed, especially on the arbitration side and how that impacts everything that goes on in this process. So
there have actually been two hearings on my bill and on Seth Grove's bill, which is the cash balance plan.
Yeah.
And the municipal governments, in large part, would like to see this issue addressed. They would certainly like to have pension issues off of the bargaining table when they bargain with their unions. So I think there might be a fertile ground to come up with something that really would benefit the municipalities, but also the people that work for them as well.
And I guess we'll just have to see the state piece go first and then go from there.
Yeah.
Appreciate you taking the time today to talk about pensions.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jason.